Okay, so the topic I'm going to be discussing is a little bit different. We have heard about VS Code, which was awesome. I always enjoy those VS Code videos. And then I missed the first few because I'm on the Pacific Coast and I don't get up that early. but a lot of the things that I like to discuss is centered around our workflow. Right. We often don't talk about a workflow. We talk about technical things or tools, right? And I'm going to be talking about a tool, but more specifically, how to use that tool to cater towards a different kind of workflow. And if you do not know what R10k is, first of all, it's awesome. And it's been around for quite some time. It is available in Puppet Enterprise, kind of hidden under Code Manager. And if you're not using Puppet Enterprise, it is just available as R10k. So the title of my slide is R10k single branch. It's a strategy that I am adopting that I believe is, at least for me, my path forward into better Git development workflows. So first off, who am I? My name's Corey Osman. I've been around the Puppet community for 12 years, which is a long time. I've got a hat on to show how young I am. I do a lot of development work outside of just Puppet. I am a service delivery partner with Puppet as well. And I love making tools either for Puppet or just for various other things. And I'm also very heavy into crypto mining and a developer. And I love bringing my Puppet skills into crypto mining as well. It's also just very fun. So you may have seen me as NWOPS on Slack answering questions, or maybe just asking questions myself. There's no way that we can know everything all the time or remember everything all the time. So I'm always on there asking questions and answering questions. I do have a name crisis. I've got sort of my past self, which is Logic Minds. So you'll often see stuff under Logic Minds and under NWOPS. So I talked about workflow very briefly, and I've had this slide in some previous decks I've used. What is efficient development, right? It's not how fast we move, the speed at which we move, right? We can all type really fast, but what if we type a lot of mistakes and we have to correct those mistakes? Speed doesn't really play there. So efficiency is that ratio where it's basically the amount of input you do and the total work required to complete the process, right? So throughout this whole Puppet camp, I want you to think about what are some of the things that you have learned in order to improve your efficiency. I know just by watching James with the VS Code that there's quite a few things that just enabling alone will help increase your efficiency, right? Number one thing that I've noticed is the Puppet file parsing. I don't have to go to the web, go to the Forge, go check out what new module it is, right? It's right there. So just knowing how to enable that will greatly reduce or greatly increase your efficiency. All right, now this next slide. So I wasn't sure how to do this slide deck because there's just so many angles to, I guess, talk about it. There's the what if people have never heard of R10k. There's the what if people have been using R10k and set in their ways. So I had built up this very nice slide deck over the last week or so and had timed everything. And then this happened. Somehow my entire slide deck was locked by a password and I don't remember the password. But that's okay. We're just going to roll with it. And what we're going to do is we're going to do more of a live demo instead. I'm guessing that presentation that I had meticulously maintained was just not meant to be. Now, during the next course of events, I want you to look at the workflow that I'm trying to instill here. we know that we have to test code, right? And R10k brings in the ability to give us these ephemeral environments so that we can test our code in. We know that we have to eventually merge that code. You don't have to. If it doesn't work, you don't merge it. But when it does work, you do merge it into a branch. Now, in this particular topic, I'm going to be talking about the main branch. I'm not talking about I'm talking about the actual name of the branch is called main, right? So once we merge, then we assign the code to an environment. This is something new. I don't know if anybody else using this, but I wanted to separate the words from merge and deploy and put something in the middle, right? We want to assign the code to our environment instead of just merging and deploying and not having the ability to toggle things. Now, one of the key aspects of the topic I'm going to discuss, which I haven't even told you guys, and so I'm going to get to right now. So R10k, it is an amazing tool and has helped me and probably tons of other people out tremendously in terms of testing out their entire code base on an end system. And there is an experimental feature. I don't want to call it experimental. I've been using it, and I don't see any experimental component of it. It is available. It's been available for, I don't know, at least a year. If you're using Puppet Enterprise 2019 8.x, that's the version where I think it first appeared in. Maybe some earlier versions. And then, of course, anything newer than that is going to have it. And if you're open source, well, you get to control the exact version of R10k you're using. But at any rate, you may know R10k as you create a branch, you push the branch, and you deploy the branch, right? And that deployment process will create an environment. It's a 1-to-1 ratio of get branch to environment. So you might have 10 environments, especially if you have multiple team members. But when it comes to the production branch, right, everything eventually gets merged down into that production branch. And we call this strategy the promotion strategy. We start with a feature branch. We merge that feature into development. We merge development into QA. We merge QA. Maybe there is another branch in there. Some of you don't have all of these, but a lot of the setups that I've seen, we merge QA into maybe acceptance. And then we merge acceptance into production. And this is because we are unsure of our code. We don't trust it, and we shouldn't, because let's just face it, we're not good at writing perfect code. We have to test and validate. So we have all these stopgaps in order to test and validate our code. And the problem that I see with the current R10k workflow is that you're merging like 5 times just to get from feature X to production. And along that trip, you're probably going to have merge conflicts, and this branch is going to be way out of date than the other branch. Many merge commits, and it's just going to look like a horrible mess in terms of looking at the history of each branch. And so sometimes you might have applied a fix in one branch and forgot to move it down to the other branch, right? You might have a hotfix branch that was specifically applied to production only, and that you were supposed to go back and fix it in dev, but you didn't for whatever reason. So there's some things that R10k can do better at, right? It's not good at precise control. And so the YAML environment source, it's just a little bit different, right? You still have environments, you still have branches, but you're not merging nearly half the amount of time, right? And so that gives us the ability to assign code to our environment instead of merging code to our environments, right? And by assigning that, we get to specify exactly what it looks like in a map, right? So here we have a production environment specification. We tell it the type, which is get, we tell it where to get the code, and then we tell it the ref. And that's very different than what you might be used to with the normal R10k workflow, because normal R10k workflow, it forces you to have to merge in order to get this feature set. And with the YAML workflow, all you do is you just fill it out right here. Excuse me. And you can have any number of environments listed in this map file. Now branches, which I've talked about before, and I've sort of, this is the sort of traditional, we'll call it control branch, and I need to control, so it'd be a little bit different here, right? So we have our acceptance, our QA, our development branches, and then our production, which that is our default, and normally it's protected, but I didn't pay for GitHub, so they don't allow me to protect that branch. And then we might have a hotfix branch, and hotfix is here just to fix a problem that we found all the way in production, and we had to wait probably 4 weeks for it to get to production. Now, the new way with the YAML environment is that we have just a single main branch, right? Everything else is a feature branch, or maybe you have a fix branch, however you want to name your branches, but I like to do features and fixes, right? So I have fix dashboard, feature puppet agent, feed underscore YAML. I say feature, but you'll often see feed underscore just because it's less keys to type. And so in this strategy, we have a single branch. There's no development, there's no production, there's no QA, there's no acceptance. You work on your feature, you test it out, you merge it to main. Just because you merge it to main, it is no longer automatically deployed per se. That's kind of up to you. That's the difference here, is that we have not deployed anything, we've just merged to main. And it's very clear where everything goes. You don't have to guess which branch you need to merge into. You check out main, and let's say main updates while you're working in the CI feed. Then you rebase against main, and then you merge into main. So that's a big difference. And let's just look back. So we've got acceptance, QA, development, right? Well, I'm going to create a feature. Should I work off development or production? I'm not really sure. Could be either one of those. You know, normally production, but maybe someone merges hotfix, you know, who knows? Okay. So we have the difference between the branches. Let's also look and see how this might be configured. It's actually very simple. I talked about a map. And what I've done here is I've recreated the acceptance, development, production, QA environments that we are used to seeing. They are not branches. They are merely just environments specified in environments.yaml file. This is a map of how and what you want, right? And so here we can specify all kinds of nice new things here that we didn't have the ability to before. So what kinds of new abilities, you ask? Because I can't hear you. We'll say, what if you wanted to version your control repo? I've been doing this, but it's been a little difficult. But the YAML environment allows us to take a snapshot of our control repo with the Puppet file and all the higher data inside of it, make a release, set that release, assign it to any Maybe we want to have it in development first. We don't trust ourselves. And we simply assign it to our environment, and then we deploy. The development environment will get version 1 in production. Let's say maybe it gets 2, right? And maybe QA will get main, right? So QA is always going to get the latest code. Now, technically, development should get main as well, just because we want to be able to find the bugs first. So we're going to put, right? So I've merged my feature branch into my main branch. I've assigned my code to an environment. And then I call pup deploy, well, with an environment, of course. Pup deploy is an alias. That alias will SSH into my Puppet server and also run Puppet code deploy in the branch that I specify. So it's likely that you won't have pup deploy, but you can make it. So pup prime is an SSH config that I have for my Puppet server. And then I just run Puppet code deploy -w. And then, of course, I pass in production. Now, I have a couple of branches. I'm going to go ahead and just run --all. So this is a code manager thing. I haven't used R10k directly in a while. I would imagine that there is also a --all. And what we'll see here is that all the things are deployed. So all the environments that I specified actually have a different map file. So we're not going to see all of them, but we're going to see a lot of the same ones. And it is going to take a little bit longer just because it's deploying all the environments, right? So you can see that I have a fixed dashboard. I have a feet Puppet agent. Let's see, I have a production, a QA, a development, right? And all of those are then are just tied to this environments.yaml file. So as I was mentioning, this is a little bit different way than what you're used to, because you're used to just pushing a branch. Now we can still do that. We can push a feature branch, and that will turn into an environment. We'd also specify our more long-term environments in this map file. Now, how do you configure? So there's a couple steps, and I'll outline them in a future blog article. But it's just creating this initial environments.yaml file. And then the other piece of it is, see if we go to data common, is that this is what you would need to do. And this is for Puppet Enterprise, of course. And if you're not using Puppet Enterprise, you simply just replace this with the R10k module. The exact same feature set. And the difference here is we're adding a YAML type here, right? So there's nothing you really have to change with your setup other than create this new entry here. And then we're going to specify the path on our Puppet server to point to our environments.yaml file. Now, I mentioned that we can also still push and create environments with that 1-to-1 ratio of branch to environment. And that's because I've also specified this entry here. So most of us will only have one, but if you want both functionalities, then you can also specify this get to. And we can toggle the prefix to true or false. So if you want your environments to be get_branch name, then you would toggle this to true. If you don't, which I do find a little bit annoying for me, just because I'm not used to having the get_. But if you do want to add that prefix, that's here. And then the other thing that we have to make sure that we do is we have to ignore some of the branches. So we ignore the main branch because we don't want that to turn into an environment. And we can ignore other ones like, I don't know, maybe you already have a development branch, but you want to ignore it. So this is pretty much it, right? You have this file and the environments.yaml file. And then once you do that, then you'll have the best of both worlds. You'll have this ability to assign Puppet environments. And so this is my 2019.8 PE dashboard, our PE console. And so I'm just showing here that these are the different environments that this is not a branch. This is just an environment that I specified in my environments.yaml, as well as the production and QA. All right, so there are some great articles that detail some of the things that we were doing before. So R10k has traditionally used this environment branching strategy, right? However, I had mentioned that we were merging dev into QA, QA into acceptance in production, right? And that has worked pretty well for the majority of us, but there's always some merge conflicts, and I feel like it's just unnecessary work. We want to be efficient, so let's work on that. So I didn't write this article. But in this case, he says never merge one environment branch into another. And that's what we're currently doing. So, and some of us may be committing directly to stage or dev, All right, so I'll pass these out in a future blog article, or I can also paste them in Slack channel. The other article that I've been reading, which is along the same lines as what I've been talking about, is this one here. So it talks about environment branches and feature branches. It talks about some of the pitfalls of the get flow model and some other things, right? You're not really writing code here. You're trying to figure out how you and your team can deliver code more efficiently. And so, think about that when you're reading this. There are just better ways of doing things. And you have to expose yourself to figure out what those ways are. And I'm telling you that there are multiple ways to manage your R10k merge strategies. So we have the environment branch, and then we have just this main branch strategy, which this guy is talking about, and which I am talking about as well. Okay, so I don't know, are you the 5-minute warning or are you the 20-minute warning?
Yeah, we're coming up pretty close to time here. I didn't know if you had any questions you wanted to answer, or if you wanted to just talk through. We don't have too many questions in Slack right now, but I did want to point out that this environments.yaml feature, Reed committed it about a year ago, and I've dropped a link into it because there's some good conversations about how that feature works, and there's a video demo where Reed goes through something similar to what you're describing, in case people aren't following what's going on with the YAML file there.
And there was one thing that I did not mention, and it's if you don't want to use an environments.yaml file to specify your environment mapping, you can specify a command, and that command will return the contents of that environments.yaml file. So you can make this a bit more dynamic. This command is it's a very naive command to get the contents of the file, but you could get it from a database or from I don't know, ServiceNow or something like that. I do want to mention just a quick couple of tips that are unrelated before I take questions, if there is any, is if you're not using OhmyZSH, it is amazing. I teach it to everyone I know, so now I have an audience of almost 90 people. what it allows you to do is it sets up just a whole bunch of, maybe you have noticed, let's see. Yeah. So I use aliases a lot, and this sets them all up at once for you automatically. I was gonna, okay, so here we go. Right. So I've made a couple aliases. I'm offering them up in a repo. But if I want to type PDK console and go to the console, I can certainly do that. I've got all kinds of aliases. The get aliases alone will save you hours and hours and hours of time. If you type get status and you've typed it 100 times, get status is GST. And I sort of have this workflow, GST, GC for get commit, and GG push for get push, and then the branch name. So it's very simplified, and I do that probably 10 times or more in an hour sometimes. All right, so pecan.
Yep. Martin would like to know if you can use the environments.yaml, like the YAML source, like along with long-lived branches like staging or UAD or dev or anything, or whether it's a one or the other.
It's not a one or the other. In fact, that's what I was showing, is that I have both supplied here. So you can use both. You know, and this where that dictates, you know, do you ignore more than just the main branch? And so if you want to have a production branch, you know, that's up to you. There's a lot more configurability, but this is how you specify both. It's not a one or the other.